Please be seated. Recognize the Honorable Fifth Elected Member from the District of Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak on the throne speech, the budget policy statement, and the budget address. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we do have to congratulate the government for doing what it has done over the last 3 years. The fact that we are FFR compliant, fact that we have an approved budget, those are all things that should be lauded. So I congratulate them. But Madam Speaker, when you look at some of these numbers, and where money is being spent, there are some questions. Madam Speaker, when you are in government, I think it's good at times to take some health checks and go back to the people. Because things change after the campaign, and statements made in the heat of battle sometimes should stay on the battleground. And then you recalibrate once you find the actual situation. Madam Speaker, when we look over the past several years, we understand that the Caymanian population has grown faster than the economy on average. That makes you then question sustainability. And although previous speakers have said that the credit will not be taken for things that weren't done in this administration, if you look back at strategic policy statements and other documents over this last year, including statements by the Governor, the Honorable Minister of Finance, supported by the Premier. We see that there are 4 temporary factors driving economic activity and therefore growth. Health City, Madam Speaker, the Kimpton and the DART investments, and we've heard all of them from previous speakers. And also, to a certain degree, the Cayman Economic City, CEC. Madam Speaker, none of these things were started in this administration. And none of them can be sustained without a growing population, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, that's where I want to focus my debate. Because when you look at the economic stimulus measures that we see on page 18 of the Minister of Finance's statement, we're continuing to follow the economic stimulus measures, which he says are designed to support economic growth, lower the cost of doing business and living here in the Cayman Islands. And I'll just go through those 5, Madam Speaker. Reduce import duty on diesel fuel used by CUC to generate electricity. Reduced import duty for licensed traders. Reduced import duty on building materials. Reduced trade and business license fees for new licenses, and continuation of current incentives for Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Now, Madam Speaker, all of these things have resulted in some savings, but not necessarily for the average Caymanian, at least not in any meaningful way. And Madam Speaker, I dare say that without some measures to really grow the economy and a plan, and I'll come back to that word later, investors won't continue to invest in huge developments in the Cayman Islands. Why would they? They don't have enough people to fill their buildings. And I'm here, Georgetown revitalization touted over and over, Madam Speaker. And that's very important for me as a Georgetown representative. I see almost $7 million in the budget for this. And I'm happy to see it, except for I haven't seen it, meaning the revitalization. I've seen some activity in connecting some roads. I've seen some activity on the waterfront, putting up some cover for the fishermen and a nice new sidewalk, which was the initiative of private sector, Madam Speaker. But there are very few companies left in central Georgetown, Madam Speaker. And when we look again at what we're building, what is the overall plan for central Georgetown? One of the draws that we have in this area is the courthouse, Madam Speaker. It's probably one of the only draws in this area anymore. Where is the urban planning, the business case, all of those things that would move that anchor outside of town? Madam Speaker, let's explore the GDP growth. When you peel back the numbers, it's actually slightly negative. Madam Speaker, I think as a country, we need to start thinking about GDP per capita as a better indicator. We have issues, we know, at collecting information because we don't have readily available figures that other jurisdictions would have. But I would say, Madam Speaker, that much of that GDP stated is irrelevant because it inures to overseas shareholders. Because if you took out CEC, Health City, and the Kimpton out of GDP growth, we'd actually be in a recession. And those things were 3 to 5 years in the making. So if you look forward 3 to 5 years, Madam Speaker, and you ask what will take their place, and we hear a lot about the investments that are coming, but we've heard about them for over 3 years. Will we be left with a huge hole in the economy if some of them don't come to fruition? Madam Speaker, I'm sure CEC, DART, let's use the Kimpton. All those organizations have done detailed economic impact studies and could tell you how much they've contributed to the Cayman Islands economy. And just going back to GDP, Madam Speaker, and why GDP per capita is considered a better guide to living standards than GDP by itself. Because if you look at the last 3 years, there's actually been a decline in GDP per capita. If you're using the entire population rather than just per Caymanian. So we have to be careful, Madam Speaker, when we're looking at statistics. Because they can tell us anything we really want them to tell us. Madam Speaker, again, if you focus on those projects that I spoke about earlier, my rough estimate is that they have to account for at least $250 million in economic activity. And that's significant, Madam Speaker, because that's about 9% of GDP. And again, just to highlight that point, without those developments, we'd actually be in dire economic straits. Madam Speaker, Nobel laureate Paul Krugman often refers to something he has termed the confidence fairy. According to legend, the confidence fairy visits countries in the night, spreading goodwill and economic activity and investment. The great thing about the confidence fairy is that skillful politicians all over the world appear to be able to summon it at will to cure all manner of ills or otherwise take the blame for them. Well, Madam Speaker, I'm delighted to see that the confidence fairy appears to have been busy working its magic here in the Cayman Islands. But Madam Speaker, sadly, not every economist believes in the confidence fairy. There are some skeptics that believe governments should rely on strategic policies instead of magical thinking. So, Madam Speaker, in case there are any such skeptics in this House or among the public listening to this debate at home, I'd like to ask the Honorable Premier or the Minister of Finance to point to any specific evidence of increased investor confidence. Is there some survey of investors that suggests they have confidence in the things this administration has brought forward? Or is this an example of circular political logic whereby they believe the economy has grown because of increased investor confidence and believes there's an increased investor confidence because of a growing economy. And Madam Speaker, I'll go into some of that investor confidence a bit later. And I go back to GDP again, Madam Speaker. I've taken some time to speak to some economists in preparing for this contribution to this debate. Some will tell you what matters is not the total amount of economic activity in a country, but the economic activity per person. And that's why I touched on that per capita GDP before. If the population is growing faster than the economy, while it may be true that the economy overall is growing, on a per person basis, the economy is actually shrinking, and the people of the country correspondingly worse off. Madam Speaker, the government's own data reveals that is in fact the case here in the Cayman Islands. While GDP growth in the last 3 years has averaged 1.9%, the average population growth has been more than 4%. This means that the economy, on a per capita basis, has actually contracted each year and every year of this administration by more than 2%. This, of course, Madam Speaker, is not an argument against population growth, because I, for one, believe, again, that should be part of that plan I spoke about. And I'm going to keep using that word, plan. But it's an argument against anemic economic growth. And I don't know if the Minister of Finance will acknowledge that GDP per capita is a superior measure of economic performance, or whether or not he would acknowledge that the population has grown more quickly than the economy. But again, the Premier used incontrovertible facts. And I guess the rhetorical question to ask is whether in the last 3 years, Caymanians are better off. To say it in layman term, Madam Speaker. If the answer is that the Caymanian population has not grown as quickly as the overall population, then I would dare say that no economist in the world would exclude non-nationals from the GDP per capita calculation for a country. The Caymanian population grew last year at 2.4% compared to GDP growth of 2%. In other words, the Caymanian population grew 20% faster than the economy. Madam Speaker, I'm not an economist. but I do talk to them because I realize when I don't know what I don't know. And some economists, experts who practice daily, think that a better approach to the management of the economy would be to set an annual target for growth in GDP and growth in GDP per capita, and to form a strategy to achieve that target that incentivizes inward investment, trade, economic activity, with a priority on local entrepreneurism and employment in high quality, well-paying jobs. A plan, Madam Speaker. The Premier stated that people are investing in Cayman again and alluded to the supposedly strong economic growth. Yet, all of the most significant development projects in recent years begun under the previous administration. Conservatively, Madam Speaker, using that $250 million in economic activity that I spoke about earlier, that would be about 9.6% of our $2.6 billion GDP. And that leaves us with a conundrum. Without these major developments, where would we be? And without a plan that facilitates future development, without lots of red tape, and which gives surety for investors, who would be taking the blame? So again, just for the record, Madam Speaker, can the Premier or the Minister of Finance point to any specific private sector development project that has contributed significantly to the economy during this term in office that was not already approved or underway upon taking office in 2013? But has that started? The Premier has suggested that the development underway will be good for Caymanians and create Caymanian jobs. And that would be a good thing. But let's look at the types of jobs created by these development projects, Madam Speaker. Tourism or construction. Let me just give you some statistics, Madam Speaker, because we like statistics, because they're incontrovertible. Caymanians account for only 30% of the workforce in tourism. About 1,300 people out of 4,300 people. And 40%.
Not a single Caymanian hotel manager?
of the workforce in construction. About 1,500 out of 4,000 people. Anecdotal evidence over the years seems to suggest, Madam Speaker, that Caymanians, many Caymanians, would prefer to work in other sectors such as office administration, financial services, rather than tourism or construction. So what evidence does the Premier have to suggest that the jobs created by these projects will be filled by Caymanians? What evidence will point to whether there's been any growth in the part of the economy Caymanians actually want to work and start businesses in? But again, Madam Speaker, that comes back to the plan. When the Premier got up and started speaking about Winston Churchill, I was wondering if he was speaking about me. But I guess it was my namesake. The truth is incontrovertible. That's like saying, Madam Speaker, that the sun rose at 5:30 this morning. Doesn't necessarily mean that the PPM administration deserves the credit for it. Madam Speaker, the government has released a very significant number of pages in recent days relating to the budget. I guess it might have been a little sooner at the $200 plate dinner, but it was just glossed over. But I'd like to draw attention to those in the public to what I believe to be the most relevant section. A little known section that could easily be missed by the uninitiated, Madam Speaker, called the core government financial statements, which members of the public will find starting on page 342 of the annual plan. The financial statements show the forecast financial information for the current year ending June 30th. The actual figures for the previous year ending June 30th, 2015, and the forecast for the coming 18-month period. Again, Madam Speaker, the government has taken credit for an increase in revenue that many believe has simply come about as a result of policies already in place at the time this administration took office. In fact, Madam Speaker, the Honorable Finance Minister appears to be trying to have it both ways by repeatedly highlighting that he has cut government revenue by some $30 million in the last year, while also taking credit for an increased surplus. At the same time, according to those financial statements that I referenced, the policies have the government have led to an increase in operating expense of some $35 million between the years ended June 2014 and 2015, with a further increase planned in the coming 18-month period. Adding the $30 million cut in revenue to the $35 million increase in expenses for the most recent year. Simple math tells us, Madam Speaker, that while the PPM has spent the last 2 days congratulating itself on the operating surplus of $146 million, that could easily have been $210 million and could have allowed them to pay down an additional $75 million of the national debt. Madam Speaker, note 16 to the core government financial statements on page 364 provides a line-by-line analysis of government revenue. Given that all of the revenue policies specifically cited in the budget documents are in fact cuts to revenue, yet the government insists on claiming credit for an overall increase in revenue, can the government point to any specific policy of its administration that has positively impacted any line item in note 16? Can it provide an analysis of the line items affected by the policies that account for that total surplus of $146 million? Or is that $146 million surplus simply a generous gift from that elusive confidence fairy? Madam Speaker, and how do we plan to celebrate the end of the FFR? By going out and spending $100 million on capital projects, an increase of some $60 million over the prior year, as well as once again increasing spending on government personnel. Madam Speaker, it was just a few years ago that we had lessons laid bare in the Miller-Shaw report of continually increasing fixed costs in the face of uncertain and unpredictable revenues. Will this government, Madam Speaker, expose us as a country again to this type of risk? And will we be left standing naked if the global economic tide goes out unexpectedly? Madam Speaker, this is about, again, a plan. And what is that plan, Madam Speaker? Is it those things that I read out that are the economic stimulus packages? Madam Speaker, if we fail to plan, we plan to fail. we have serious skills gaps in our people. We've heard about plans to increase vocational services. We've heard about ready-to-work programs. Madam Speaker, I'll come back to those. We also heard about plans to revise immigration laws and policies. We have an opportunity, Madam Speaker, as a country, as a government, as an opposition, to really create an era of prosperity, to create opportunities to affect lasting socioeconomic, political, and cultural reforms. But Madam Speaker, the problem that we have is that we can't get out of our own way. We can't take on constructive criticism, and we can't take on ideas that are not our own. So basically, Madam Speaker, every 4 years, we reinvent the wheel rather than having a plan. And Madam Speaker, like I said before, I will get into what a plan could be and what it could do rather than just letting the process be investor driven, Madam Speaker, because that's what we have right now. We have somebody that walks up with a shiny briefcase and a tie and a suit and says, by the way, I'm going to do something wonderful for your country. I'm going to invest here, and it's going to be the biggest, boldest, brightest thing you've ever seen. And you're going to have a lot of trickle-down economics, and I'm going to make a lot of profit.
Like the ice skating ring in Georgetown.
So what are you going to give me? What economic stimulus package are you willing to give me? And the government, or some members of the government, sit in a back room and say, well, what do you want? I want what the last person got. I can't give you that because it was too good of a deal. But let's start on the declining amount. Let's tell you where we can start from, and then let's see how this goes. The problem with that, Madam Speaker, is it's the most inefficient way of stimulating growth and projects in your country, because there's no plan. And these deals then take years to negotiate. So by the time you finish negotiating them, it's almost the end of your 4 years. But you've been using those projects to say that you're positively impacting GDP. Not GDP per capita, but GDP. Madam Speaker, we know we're not preparing our people to properly take advantage of the opportunities that we are creating. But again, Madam Speaker, without a plan, we haven't actually put in place what all those opportunities might be. We haven't taken investors to task and said, let's influence behavior, Madam Speaker, and let's maximize the government dollar that we're spending. Rather than just giving incentive after incentive without tying it to actual employment, and I'm talking about percentages of employment, actual jobs where Caymanians are qualified to take jobs in each layer of those job opportunities. Rather than dictating knowledge transfer, Madam Speaker, and trying to push Caymanian participation by giving a sliding scale of economic benefits. The higher the Caymanian participation, the higher the benefit. That's what happens without a plan, Madam Speaker. And this isn't something that I'm dreaming up, Madam Speaker. When you look at other first world countries and governments, that's how they operate. Because the money that they spend, they want to touch a certain number of their people with some surety. Not a scattergun approach by saying that if we put in economic stimulus to a project, that it will touch some Caymanians and we'll get the trickle-down effect. Specific, you will hire 60% Caymanians, 70% Caymanians, 80% Caymanians. You will look for a Caymanian partner. And Madam Speaker, until we do that, our people are going to keep missing the boat. That rising tide that's supposed to lift all ships is not lifting Caymanian ships. Madam Speaker, we've had 3 years to ensure that our policies reflect some of these things. That our immigration policies, that our NWDA policies, that our government policies are sharpened and focused on Caymanian prosperity, Madam Speaker. And don't say to me, oh, well, if you have to hire a Caymanian, the deal is going to be done and they're going to walk away. Madam Speaker, I've been referred in this House as a naive politician. And I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night, Madam Speaker. Believe
Is
me, I
it
took
still
it
the
as one.
intention of the House to work until 7?
It's 7 o'clock, man. We all plan to leave at 7.
I can finish tonight. I'm prepared. Huh? Finish tomorrow? Yeah. All right. Is it 7? It's 7. I'll finish. As we gotta finish tomorrow.
Recognize the Honorable Premier for the motion for the adjournment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the adjournment of this Honourable House until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
The question is that this Honorable House be adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The House is accordingly adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.